NIA Centre for the Arts promotes, showcases, and supports the arts from across the African diaspora. As part of NIA Centre's work, we're proud to showcase to you a series of artist conversations as part of our Left of Centre program. Left of Centre is a 2-year artist incubator that supports the careers of emerging Black artists working across a wide range of disciplines. And as part of the Left of Centre program, you're here to listen to a series of artist conversations from folks like Sarah Ty Black, Kevin Ray, and more. These conversations are meant to support emerging artists in propelling their careers forward from everything from grant writing, developing artist statements, and empowering yourself as a Black creative in this city. Stay tuned for more, and if you have any questions, you can always email NIA Centre at info@niacenter.org, or you can follow us online at NIA Centre as well across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks so much and enjoy.
So understanding who you are as an artist and how to effectively communicate that to a variety of audiences can be really difficult. I'm sure all artists have struggled with that at one time or another. And I think particularly for emerging artists, it can be difficult as you're sort of starting out, because so much of who you are as an artist can be also tied to who you are personally, and just sort of grappling with what that all means is definitely a challenge. So we're here today with Fiona Raye Clarke. So excited to have you chat through artist statements, bios, how best to describe yourself and pitch yourself in the real world as an artist. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
So I still call myself emerging, but I've kind of emerged, writer and community engaged artist. I am currently working on my first novel, and I'm at the stage of actually pitching myself, like querying, so that you have a manuscript that you're proud of, and then you take it to the next level if you want representation from an agent. So that's the stage I'm at in my career. I've gone through feedback, grants, all of those processes, pitching to different publications, trying to get my work out there, and marketing myself as an artist. So I've kind of done all of those steps as both a writer and a community engaged artist in the realm of theater.
And what's great, I think, about your experience is you've both thought about this from your own practice as well as supported other artists to think about it. So you've experienced on sort of both sides of the table, which is really critical. So I want to start out first by talking about artist statements versus artist bios. We see this on mostly grant proposals, and as well sort of in other proposals that are required of artists. What's the difference between an artist bio and an artist statement?
So a bio is usually like a quick rundown of, who you are, what you've done most recently. So most things, if you get into something or if you're being featured on something, they want a headshot and they want a bio. And what that bio is, it just says, these are kind of the things that I'm most proud of or most impressive about me. If you don't have, credits to your name, if you don't have certificates in creative writing, for example, or schooling, formal schooling, or experience in mentorship programs, then what you would have in that statement is who you are, what you do, where you live, and what you're interested in or about. And sometimes people lean it towards something funny, like they end on a funny note, like, Fiona lives with her 3 cats,
right.
In Toronto. Or they can leave it on a more serious note of like, she's currently working on her first novel in progress. So that's just a quick statement of like who you are, what you do, and what people can expect from you. Whereas an artist statement is more of a formulation of like who you represent as a writer, as an artist. And it usually, as you said, goes with an application. So you kind of have to think more broadly of what are the themes, what are the topics, what are you trying to say as an artist right now? And usually that changes, hopefully, over time with more experience and more projects. But it's definitely a broader statement and a broader thought process of like, what is my vision as an artist? What do I represent? And what do people need to know about me?
Right. So you would need to go through a process of reflecting on what the purpose of your work is and what themes are you trying to convey in order to create an artist statement. And the artist bio is kind of like who you are, more of the factual elements.
Exactly. More factual, hard, like quick and dirty. Usually people have a long form bio, so they have more in detail of the things that they've presented, published, awarded, certificates that they have. Whereas the quick short bio is just like the highlights. And whereas an artist statement is like a longer form of thought around your work.
Could you give us an example of an artist statement?
I definitely can. Wonderful. So I have a statement that I use for my grant writing. So to get grants as a writer, you generally have to give a little bit of a statement of both who you are, as I said, what your work is trying to do, and what you're interested in at the time. So you'll hear that from me now. As a Trinidadian-Canadian, Afro-descended, new generation literary artist and writer, living with the legacy of sexual violence within me, my main aim is to reclaim voice for my people, i.e. to center the voices of marginalized identities. To date, my practice has included publication and/or production in fiction, playwriting, screenwriting, nonfiction, and poetry. However, I'm currently shifting my practice to focus on the novel because my characters have grown too big for short stories. I'm interested in creating writing that is imaginative, political, showcases alternative and hidden narratives, features queer people of color, and engages critically with my ancestry. Black women are centered in my work because we do the work of holding up the world. At this time, I'm interested in exploring the notion of what it looks like when Black women love ourselves and each other. In addition to literary arts, I'm a community-engaged writer and theater artist. My practice includes creating non-hierarchical spaces where the self-esteem of the writer can be preserved and celebrated, and doing oral history-based theater work with Black youth. In gathering stories from Black elders, piecing their scattered lives into narrative shapes for sharing, I seek to highlight the contributions, achievements, and fights these everyday heroes have gone through for younger artists like me to be able to stand on their shoulders. All of this feeds into my literary works, such as my work in progress, Maldiction, because it was in cultivating a practice of looking back that I stumbled upon a family story of a Bruja ancestor in Venezuela and imagined my family's journey to Trinidad, the United States, and Canada. I write to create a more just world by making it more beautiful than I met it.
Amazing.
We're quite hard on that.
I was like, yes.
But see, it takes a lot of time to think of that and like speak from a genuine voice, because people can kind of tell when you're not being serious and you're saying things that are just kind of on trend, kind of like what representations people think that you should be offering as a Black artist.
Right.
But I suggest really deeply reflecting on your identity more than in a tokenizing way. Like, you are the holder of your voice, like express that voice to the nth degree as much as you can and be honest with it, and let somebody else tell you that it's too much.
Right. That's such an important point, because as you were reading, I was also thinking about how folks can become stereotyped into what, projections of what Blackness and what a Black artist is, and feeling pressure to write in that way about themselves, and how important it is for that to be authentic for themselves, for Blackness to be represented in its widest variety of expression. And so, you're speaking to that point of being authentic. How do you go through a process of like refining? Like, how did you get to that product? I'm sure it started off in a different place.
So for me, I'm a overwriter. So I will just put down thoughts of what's the kind of stuff I'm interested in doing? What am I doing now? What do I think my project is saying? And then if, you're really stuck, I would offer it to the people who know you, who know your work, who know your voice, and ask them, does this reflect what I'm trying to say? My project, is this me? Because sometimes we're not the best judge and sometimes we downplay what we're doing.
Right.
So for me, there were a lot of powerful things that I want to say and I have been saying, around our voices, Black women loving themselves, the story of family and trauma and survival. And so I wanted that represented in my statement. So, question whether those are things you want to put in, or, what are points that are important to you that you're I absolutely cannot have somebody think about my work without knowing this about me.
Right. So you mentioned a couple of good tips there, getting other people to give feedback, really going through the process of refining and thinking about your purpose and intention with your art. Is there any tips you could offer emerging artists in developing an artist statement?
So I would say, look at the most recent work that you've been doing. Have you shifted gears? So for me, I started out doing short stories because that's kind of where you start if you're somebody who writes fiction. And then I talked about how I am making this giant shift to novel, which is its whole own beast. But are there shifts that you're interested in making? Are there ones that you're doing right now? where do you want to be? Like, you could even talk about that. You could speak aspirationally in your artist statement. You don't necessarily have to just talk about where you are right now, because, we're always striving with that next application, with that next submission. It's not necessarily about where we are right now, but where we would like to go.
Right. So important. Think about your future, and that's part of your statement as well. I wanted to move on to another sort of, I think, key tool for emerging artists in being able to accurately think about where they are and where they're heading and communicating to audiences, which is flash assessments, specific to writers, but I think is not sort of a tool that many folks are as familiar with. Can you tell us a bit about what a flash assessment is?
So a flash assessment is when, you have an opportunity to get your work in front of decision makers. Whether they're making a decision on you right now is irrelevant. It's more you're preparing your work and you're preparing yourself and your project to be looked at critically. So for a writer, for example, a lot of flash assessments include either a first page of your manuscript or, the project that you're working on, just a little taste of it to entice somebody. So for me, flash assessments I've seen in the past either are geared towards getting representation, so finding an agent. So an agent would want a query letter. So you would work very hard on crafting that query letter that kind of pitches and sells your product, your project, your manuscript, and then a first page. So usually they want to see the letter that sells that project, and then, do I feel like reading the project? And then they would go to the next page. So,
and the query letter, what's usually in that?
A query letter usually includes kind of that same quick selling point. So you would say why you're addressing that particular agent, why you're submitting to them, what caught your eye about them, about their agency, about books that they've represented or helped come into this world. You would have your word count of your project. So your manuscript's word count, you would know it would be done. You wouldn't be querying if you weren't done. And then the genre of that project. And then you would have a little statement, a summary, a synopsis, a quick 1 or 2 paragraph synopsis of what your project is. And then you would have that same bio that we talked about, or that same kind of artist statement, but shortened in one remaining paragraph that is like more of the biography information. And then you would close out with thanking them for their consideration of your project. So that's a quick summary of a query letter. But the point of the query letter is to show that you can follow instructions, because they usually have instructions on how to submit to them, what they would like it to see in it. And then you would show that you know the word counts in your genre, because if it's too high, for example, anything over 100,000 words, no matter what it is, will kind of always get an automatic decline or rejection. So you're showing that knowledge, you're showing that you could sell your book and you know what the theme is and what's interesting about it and how to kind of tell that in that little elevator pitch.
Right.
And then you're showing, how you're committed to your craft. Even if it's that you have no publications, you're part of clubs, you're part of a mentorship program.
You're in this arts world, writing
you're
space.
In the scene. So that would be the query part. And then other flash assessments I've seen kind of happen at events, kind of like, for example, Word on the Street, which is coming up. They offer people to put in one page. Usually it's anonymous. And then they would read that page and tell the audience and you what they thought of it, whether they would keep reading on, whether they're interested in the project, maybe things that they kind of see that are happening in that first page, because really a first page sells your book. It sells it to an agent, it sells it to an audience, like a buyer.
Is it the literal first page?
It's the literal first page. What is your first line? How are you capturing, the problem, the character, the setting, the atmosphere, your style? Like, it's really kind of all of those things on a first page, and that's kind of what people could see. So usually you would go back to that after you're done a project, but if you're just preparing for a flash assessment to kind of figure out where you are in terms of whether an agent would be interested or a publisher would be interested or an editor would be interested, just do your best to kind of sum up and like put as much feeling into that first page as you can, even if you're not done the full manuscript.
Wow. A lot of pressure on that page.
It is a lot of pressure, but again, the wonderful thing about these flash assessments is that it's just a learning tool. Right. It's not the real deal. So you're not going to go out there, finish your book, query it, put out these manuscripts, and then get an auto reject or something like that when, you could have not easily, but you could have found out that actually your beginning's a little bit slow, or your main character doesn't come in until later. I don't see them on this first page. You're just telling me about the weather.
Right.
Or, your word count is too high. You needed to edit your manuscript a few more times and to bring down that word count, because everyone in the industry knows, it's too long.
Right.
Or it's too short. So often too with emerging writers.
So this is what you would say is a critical part of that initial feedback to help you build a project that is well polished and ready for the industry to read. Now, you've been part of this process. You've gone through a flash assessment.
Yes, I have.
and you've also been on the other side of the table where you're reading others' flash assessments. Is there anything that you look for in particular when you're reading flash assessments, particularly from Black writers?
Yeah, so I think it's, again, representing your style, your voice. As I said, a lot of people kind of see Black and they think, oh, it's this or that. It's urban. We are so unique, individual people with great, wonderful, rich stories. And so just being able to tell your story and really believe in it and really, really hone that in is so critical. So for me, again, when I did my own flash assessment, I pitched it to my friends. I read it out to them, and I actually ended up having to read it out to the agent themselves because they just needed to hear it from me. And so if you practice that, and if you say it with conviction, and if it's actually what you want to be telling people, it's quite evident. So, waiting until you have more of an idea of what you want to say in your book is quite essential to me. So I think, sometimes people want to do flash assessments to kind of gauge things, which is great and fair. Mm-hmm. But, even if an assessment doesn't go well, that doesn't mean you should give up on your project. You should keep going on it and keep refining it.
Yeah, more refining, building out the idea, et cetera. So when would you say is the ideal time to do a flash assessment?
I mean, as I said, I think you can do it kind of at any time, but the greatest time is when you're really closer to finishing. So the next step logically would be to find representation. So if you were to attract someone's attention, from an agent or an editor, you would be able to give them something sooner or after if they asked for it.
Right.
So when you're looking for representation or when you're looking to submit to a publisher, usually they would request a partial. So that's called a partial in the industry, which is that they ask for, between 10 pages to 50 pages of your manuscript. And so what you're kind of looking for in a flash assessment is that kind of approval of yes, we'd love to see 50 pages of your manuscript when you're done. Mm. So the best way to take advantage of a flash assessment is that if you do get that request, you do have the product to offer.
Shortly thereafter. Yeah. It's not like you're going to need another 6 months of writing.
Yeah, it's best time. I mean, it's not always ideal because you should take advantage of flash assessments when they're available, but that's the ideal.
And so these are specifically tools that you can use in industry. Do you feel like there's now an opportunity at a community level to utilize flash assessments to sort of build up your sense of where this project could be going and get that critical feedback?
Yeah, so I think even among peers or among mentors, it could be a really good way to hone in your project. So something that I've been asked for as well from mentors is just a synopsis. Because you'll find once you've been in the weeds with your book for a really long time, you don't always know exactly what the story you're telling is because it's 100, it's 150, it's 200 pages long. Whereas usually if you have to come down to a one-page message of a synopsis of these are my characters, these are the conflicts, these are the themes, this is what you'll get out of it. It's a really, really good opportunity to kind of know, okay, I don't need that, or I do need more of that, or they have questions about this. And those are things you can wrap into your writing process and your drafting process or your revision process.
Right. And so it could be done a bit earlier than if you're doing it maybe at a community level.
Definitely.
Right. So I guess that's where, programs like Banff Centre become useful because if you're still sort of earlier on in your career, maybe still working on short stories or, earlier on in your book ideas, you have the ability to sort of draft something and then have a creative consultant like yourself look at it. Yeah. For folks, once they've done the assessment and they're getting feedback, how do you best, take in that feedback as a writer?
So the best thing, I think, is to take a lot of notes and ask questions. What did they mean when they were drawn out by this part? What did they mean when they had questions about this part? What did they mean when they were confused? Or what does excite them on the positive note? Like what makes them curious? What would make them want to read more? Finding out those things and building on them, and as you would, like building on your strengths, I think are things that you could take out of it.
Mm-hmm. So taking really copious notes and actually leaning into the criticism. Like, what are you actually?
Yeah, criticism or positive feedback, because you want to build on what's working, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so moving ahead to another way to express yourself as an artist and be able to communicate with a diversity of audience is your website. In this digital age, we know how important it is for people to be able to find you online. But I think there's a lot of artists who are wondering, when do I build a website? Do I have enough work to fill this thing out? Is it worth the sort of resources to put in? Any tips for artists on sort of the point at which they should build a website?
I think you should have a website as soon as you've kind of embarked on this writing or artistic journey. I think like even if you don't have so-called credits, professional credits, or shows behind your name, you do have a point of view, you do have a history, you do have a story to tell. And so that like, even if it's just that short, quick bio that you have to offer, a nice photo, well lit, positive, smiling, professional looking, and how people can contact you, that's something that'll get you started. Because, even if you don't have credits and you're still at the stage of pitching things to magazines or journals or submitting and getting rejected, people do look at that. People do look at, who is this person? Are they out there? Are they on that professional journey? Because honestly, like a website instantly professionalizes you, no matter what stage you are. And, as you build credits, as you build up in your career and move forward, you can have more than one page and have those credits available so that when you're pitching, people just know to look for you. So one thing I do is my website is always front and center in my signature, as long as it's not, a business professional email. Your personal email should always kind of market you a little bit, because people do look, they get bored, they get curious, right? And so people will comment, great website, or they'll learn just a little bit more about you. And that's what you want. You want to stick in people's minds and offer them something unique that they can think about and remember you for if they have something that comes up. Yeah, and it's true too that when you get an email from somebody, your interest might be piqued by that email, and then you see in the signature they have a website, you immediately want to do your own research and learn more. And so clicking on that is like another way for you to talk to them and express your story, your skills, your interests, independently of what you've reached out to them about. When did you get a website? I've been, trying to professionally write for the last 10 years or so. So I had a website at that point. And you don't have to spend lots of money. At that time, it was more like getting a web designer and all those things. But now there's like Wix, which is free. There's WordPress, which is free. There's all kinds of free steps before you pay like a monthly fee. So, even if you're at the stage of I don't have credits, but I want to be out there, get a free Wix site and throw it up there and with a photo, and that'll get you started. And so now what do you sort of have on your website? What's populated there? So now I have a few more pages. So I have, awards that I've won, honors that I've received. I have all of my publication credits. I have a long form bio and a short form bio. On my about page, I have a contact form, because like a lot of opportunities come through my website actually. So I have all of that, like basically my artistic history, and I link to it. But one thing about linking to things is making sure that the links aren't dead. So that's the kind of one thing that you have to do is, regularly updating your website and regularly, doing housekeeping on it in terms of, are there dead links? Is this an old photo? Too old? Is it 10 years old? And it doesn't look like me anymore when they see me? Or, do I have more credits to add to make myself stand out and sell myself a little bit better? Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense too for like the, basically it's like your business package. Like if someone knows that they want to work with you, they can go to that contact form, fill it out, they can immediately get your headshot, your bio without you having to send it to them. So you're kind of priming them to work with you. Are there any tools that you use to manage your website? So I use WordPress, a paid WordPress. So I pay for a hosting and a domain name, which regularly renews itself every year. And the hosting is every month. I pay a monthly fee. And then I have the WordPress. I get a template or theme that I paid for as well. And then I change that when I get bored of it. And that's how I update my website and keep it, looking good. So I just actually completed a refresh of that recently when I took new headshots and, want to steer things in a different direction.
Nice. And is there anything that you would suggest to artists, I guess, in terms of, actually, no, you already covered that, it's okay. I just want to do a time check. Okay.
Okay. That's okay.
I think that we covered a good terrain.
Hopefully I made some sense.
No, you made a lot of sense. There's a lot of good insights. Yeah, and it's actually most of it. The other thing is documenting your work, so. Yeah.
Well, documenting is the website, really.
Yeah, it's the website. Yeah, and in your case, it's fine. So yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, I would want to do just one question to you about like what you would say to Black artists. So Black writers. Yeah.
What I would say to Black artists is this is a really, really critical and important time. We're actually being heard and listened to and sought after. Like it's an incredible time to be Black and alive, while possibly being very triggering. But I would say for Black artists, use that, capitalize on that. Get that website going, even if it's that one page. Do a few more submissions than you would normally do at this time. People are really, really hungry for our content and for our voices, and they're just realizing for some reason that they haven't been listening to us this whole time. So my main thing would be get out there. It's our time. It's our time.
Absolutely. That's incredible. It's such an important message, and I want to echo every single sentiment within it. And also thank you for taking the time to chat with us today about talking about yourself, creating a website, promoting yourself to your audiences. It's such a key part of getting your foot in the door. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise.
Thank you.
All right.